I decided to make some duck stew with the ducks we got this weekend. The ones I got were this Florida Mottled over here on the left and a Blue Wing Teal over here on the right. I'm going to cheat a little bit in the broth by using chicken stock because I only have 2 birds, so that's not a whole lot of carcasses. I wish I would have kept the feet from the birds because those are actually really good to put in a stock. It'll give it a lot more body. And I think this fennel over here is going to be really nice with the wild duck as well. But we're probably only going to use about half of that. We might toss a little bit in the stew. But okay, let's get all this stuff cut up and then we will turn it into broth. Alright, first thing I'm going to do is take all the meat off these ducks that I don't want going into the broth, that I want to save for the stew. So pretty much just the breasts on both, maybe the legs off this mottled. We'll find out. Definitely going to keep these necks for the broth, not for the stew. So let's get into it. I try to stay as close to the carcass as possible. Get as much meat as possible. That wishbone is always a pain in the ass. I kind of messed that one up. There's a little soft notch in the shoulder. If you can feel it, you can cut right through it and bring that wing bone with it. Then you have a duck breast with a wing bone. I don't know, I'll probably end up cutting it off. Using it for the stock, I don't have enough as it is. So I'll cut this other one off and do this one up, and then we'll see where we're at. Okay, we got the ducks all cleaned up. Use the light on my hat, see if that helps any. There's still a little bit of meat on there, but that's okay. We need the flavor from the broth anyway. That little one just didn't have all that much meat on the legs, that Blue Wing Teal, so I just left it all on there. We'll use it for the broth. I just decided to use the breasts for the stew, and then I'm going to use all this extra leg, thigh meat, and wing meat for the broth. I'm not going to roast it. I'm going to take all these carcasses and roast them at about 425 till they get brown, and then that's what we're going to use to make the body of the broth. And then once we do that, we'll add this back in. Alright, I'm going to get all that ready. I'll roast up this carcass over here. I took the roasted ducks out of the oven once they were nice and brown, and I tossed them in this little pot because I just made them fit instead of using a giant stock pot since I only have 2. I ended up using mostly water and then just topping it off with chicken stock. Later on, if it's not strong enough, I'll just boil some of the water off and add some more chicken stock to it to give it a little more body and flavor. I added some fresh rosemary, some dried thyme, and some dried bay leaves. Probably a little bit too much thyme, but oh well. Next thing we're going to do is chop up these vegetables. Celery, carrots, fennel, and onion. We're going to toss those in at about the same time we toss in the extra meat. Which will probably be about an hour to an hour and a half before it's actually done. And we want to strain it. After we get to that point and we do strain it, we can decide if we want to reduce it and make it stronger or not before we turn it into the stew. Okay, so the water we put in there was cold, and we put everything in there and then we brought it up to a boil as fast as we could. You can see that that's boiling now, so I'm going to turn it way down to like low. I'm going to pull it off to one side, and then I'm going to cover it and leave this side open. So all the stuff, all the bad stuff, the scum we call it, will sort of float over to the side. We never want to stir this until we put the vegetables in, and that's the only time we'll stir it. You don't want to, if you do that, it'll make your broth cloudy, and we don't want to do that. So I'm going to cover this, and then we'll be back. We'll probably let this go for about 2 hours. We'll throw the vegetables in about an hour before, so in an hour. Here are the chopped up vegetables. I cut them pretty small because I only want to put them in for that short time at the end. Now, if you don't want to cut them this small and you want to cut them bigger and throw them in at the same time as the bones, and they would already be in there right now, you could do that. I mean, that is actually the classical way to do it. I just don't like to have my vegetables in there that long. I think it makes it more cloudy and you can get all the flavor out of them without them being in there for 3-4 hours. We didn't use a whole lot of the fennel. It's pretty strong stuff. The kind of ratio I try to go here with this is 1 part celery, 1 part carrot, 2 parts onion, and 1/2 part fennel. Hopefully that won't be too much. We are going to throw some more vegetables into the stew itself. This is not the vegetables that will be in the stew. We're going to strain all this out and throw it away. This is just to flavor the broth. So we'll come back when it's time to throw those and the other meat in. So I've decided that since I caught these birds down very near the Everglades, I am going to use just a tiny bit of Everglades seasoning, no salt or pepper. Usually I'll use garlic powder, onion powder, thyme, salt, pepper, and I'll put those on. Try and keep them on for like an hour or 2 at least before I cook them. Overnight is better. Maybe a little bit of oil to keep all the spices on it. Keep it sticking to the thing. You'll be surprised at how much flavor gets into those breasts if you do that tiny little marinade overnight. But I am just going to hit them with a tiny little bit of this Everglades seasoning and hope everything works out. We'll find out. So this broth has been simmering for about 2.5 hours. No, not a whole lot of scum has come to the surface, surprisingly, but it does look awfully cloudy, which is a bummer, but maybe we can strain some of that out. I think I'm going to go ahead and add the vegetables. It smells really nice. I think it's been going for a while. I think it's pretty good. I'm going to toss in the vegetables and give it maybe another hour. And then I'm going to strain it and taste it and see what it tastes like. So, it's going to be a tight fit. Depending on how this looks, we may end up switching to a bigger pot. Might be okay. Alright, this is the one and only time I'm going to stir this to get all those vegetables incorporated. I'm going to do it very, very gently. Well, I guess I'll do that off camera. Very, very gently, just to get it incorporated, and then leave it alone again for another hour. So I'm going to pull the broth off. I'm going to try and strain it through this. It's a pretty fine strainer. It's going to be difficult with those carcasses. I'm going to have to pull those carcasses out with tongs and let them drip over this or something. I'm just going to drip them into a metal bowl because the metal will transfer the heat faster than anything else. I'll keep stirring it and keep it in the fridge or the freezer so I can cool it down as fast as I can, because I'm not going to use this until tomorrow. Alright, so I'm going to do that, and then we'll taste it and see what's going on. Here's our strained duck broth. Give it a little taste. It's a little bland. I probably will end up. It's a little bland. I wish I had more carcasses. I probably will end up reducing this down a little bit. And I may put a little more chicken stock in there. I haven't decided yet. I'm definitely going to reduce it down there, so I'm actually going to do that now. And I'll let you know. What I mean is I'm just going to put this in a pot and boil it to make it smaller to concentrate the flavor. So I'll figure out how much I'll measure how much is here, and I'll measure it when I'm done, and I'll let you know how much that is. So after I measured it, it was 4 3/4 cups of stock, so I don't know what we'll boil that down to. 2 1/4 maybe, 2 1/2. We'll see.